Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Black on Black Education Podcast. I am so excited for the conversation we're going to have today. But as always, I allow our guests to introduce themselves to the people.
So, hi, everybody. I'm Charles Davidson. I am the director of the Pre-Law Institute and the Center for Postgraduate Opportunities at John Jay. I am really excited because I know Eva from my days for her days at the college. So this is and we had really always had wonderful conversations. So this is like a natural outpouring of our hours in my office talking about education, Black people, and everything in between. So I'm really excited to be here. And to see that, and to really say, just to start off, just to say how proud I am of you and how wonderful it
Thank
is that
you.
you actually made this happen. I mean, I remember sort of the arc of our conversations, right? I mean, going back years now, and it makes me so happy to see that you found something, you took it, you dreamed it, and then you made it happen. So this is really just like, this is wonderful for me to see this, just as someone who knows you from your college days.
Thank you. Yes, so as many of you know, I graduated from John Jay College, class of 2020, class of Zoom, and I am super excited about this conversation, just as Dr. Davidson said, because he was there with the birthing and the developing, and I have questions and I have no idea what I'm doing. Like he was there, kind of as a listening ear. I could pop in the office and just chat, which was always incredible. So now we're just going to press record on one of those chats. My dad's going to join us, and I'm really, really excited about it. So you mentioned what you do, like
Mhm.
your title, but can you get a little bit more into who you are? And I remember distinctly coming to your office for the first time and you asking me that, and me sitting there being like, how does one answer this question?
Wonderful.
Um, because I started out with I'm in this program, I do this, this is my GPA, this is where I am. And he's like, no, no, who are you? So I'm going to kick that question right
Look
back
at
to
that.
you. Who are you? And
So
then why is it that you do what you do?
sure. So just to get just a bit more clarity on what I do, technically, it's that, so running these programs, I basically support students who are interested in doing anything after their undergraduate years. That is, students who are interested in law school and graduate school. This is my particular area. I used to be a lawyer. I became a professor, and now I'm sort of an advisor, mentor, and resource to students who are interested in postgraduate opportunities. So that's kind of what I do. The who I am, and if you're absolutely correct, I ask that of every student. Students come in and they say, "Hi, I'm Eva," and I say, "Great," and they say, "I'm a junior," and I say, "Great." But who are you, right? So the question of who I am, I think I always answer. I think, particularly in this day and age, I start off by saying, in most audiences, I'll start off by saying, I'm someone who loves Black people. That's really, I think, what I call the organizing principle of my life, right? I have organized my life around that principle in lots of ways, professionally, personally, intellectually, spiritually. In lots of ways, I've organized myself around that. So I would say that's who I am. I also am someone who is I'm a person who very intentionally and very, I hope, planfully and thoughtfully thinks about ways in which I can support other people, right? I came from a world where ideas of success were super traditional, super middle class, become a professional, do really well, make money, live a middle class life. And I tried that. And I learned very quickly on that was not what success was going to look like for me. I always tell people that my life really changed when I was able to vocalize and to say to another person, I don't want what you want, right? And it's such a small thought, but it was a big thing for me because then it allowed me to sort of live my life in the way that I wanted to live. So I quickly left the legal work. I left the practice of law. I went back to grad school at 30. I did my master's and my PhD. And then I realized I love teaching. I love watching students learn. I love helping students learn. But the other thing I also love is I love the international world, right? I love the world outside of America very much. So I spent the next 13 years traveling around the world, teaching in schools in the Middle East, the former Soviet Union, and really helping students who had never had anyone to sort of support them in any real way outside of an academic support. And really that support academically wasn't that great. So, and when I started doing that, that really touched the nerve in me, like, oh, this is what I'm called to do. This is what I do. This is what I do. I do the teaching, I do the academic stuff, I do the administrative stuff. But really what brings me alive is when I'm in that room one-on-one with the student, having the conversations, the kind that we had about what matters to you. Like I see who I am as someone who helps people become who they are, right? And I think that's the way I would describe myself and who I am and what I do.
Beautiful.
So something that popped up for me while you were talking was you obviously work at the college and university level, but people start to typically ask kids so much earlier, like, what do you want to be, and they typically don't say who do you want to be, but I do love that question as well. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on when it's kind of appropriate to start to ask kids that question, and how do you do it in a way that you don't pigeonhole them into a particular thing before it's time?
Right. I think it's a great question. I think, it's just a well-known hallmark of our American culture, right? That we ask people when we meet them, what do you do? Right. We don't ask them about any of the qualities. We don't ask. It's like we aren't even concerned about those things. It's almost like your profession is a shorthand for who you are, for the quality of who you are. And that's a fascinating cultural phenomenon, right? Because it's obviously untrue. Obviously, we don't get any information from that. And it allows all of us to sort of walk through lives thinking we are this sort of, we are this shell, right? We're this paper resume, we're our accomplishments, we're our degrees, we're our jobs, we're all those things. So, I think to counteract that, I think it is important to start asking people early on, like, it's important to think about what you're going to do, obviously, but it's really more important to think about who you're going to be in those scenarios, right? In those situations. I absolutely wish that somebody had asked me at a much younger age. I don't know the age it would have really resonated, but I think, somewhere in my early teens, it might have started to land if somebody told me, stop thinking so much about what you want to do. Like, who do you want to be? Right? Who do you want to help? Right? I think those questions, the earlier we can inject them into the conversation, right? And it's certainly not to, obviously maybe asking a 7-year-old, it may be a little bit early, right? I mean, the self-concept is still forming at that point. But I don't think it's at all too early for us to be asking kids or starting to ask students in their middle school years, certainly in their early teen years, think about careers, think about pathways, but also think about qualities, right? Think about characteristics, think about those things, and give them the space and the tools to do that. Now, the challenge, of course, is that most educators haven't thought about it, right? Most educators are like, I'm a professor, and that's okay, and that's the end of that conversation. But we as educators have to be empowered and sort of liberated enough to be able to think about who we are, to help other people do that. I certainly wish that somebody had asked me much earlier. I think it might have helped me a lot, because one of the things I did realize is that even though I've gone through all of these sort of different phases of my life, the older I get, the more I realize I am who I always was. Right? But nobody sort of tapped into that or asked me to turn and tap into it. So I went through much of my life thinking I was this, paper CV, right? That's who I was, that I was this, I was this set of accomplishments. And, I did a talk the other day at the University of Maryland for the Black students there. And the moderator read out this bio of mine. And she got it offline, I guess. And it was a really lovely bio. And it was like all of these degrees and all of these countries and all of these jobs. And the students were like, wow, in the chat, wow. And I sat there for a minute and I thought, this is a disaster, right? I said that, and I said to the students, I said, before we begin, let me just start by saying that was a lovely bio. And I think it was great. I think, whoever wrote it, it might've been me. I think I followed the conventions of the bio genre, right? I did exactly what you do in a bio. I said, but the problem with that is that you now believe that you're talking to a person who is not that, right? That's actually not who I am, right? Ultimately, those are the things I did. Right. But the truth is, I have another resume that I can never show anybody. It's inside of me, of course, but it's that bio masks all of my failure. It masked my insecurity. It masked my imposter syndrome days. It masks all the setbacks I had. It masked the rejection. It doesn't tell you who I am. It's like a best hits, right? Without any of the flops, right? And so I had to start off that conversation by saying, like, I don't want you to get wedded to the paper version of me, nor do I want you to get wedded to a paper version of you. Right? You need to really think about that resume that you can never show anybody, which talks about in which you think about all the things that you did, but you can never tell another person. All your little victories, your secret successes, the things you've overcome that people didn't even know you were going through. That's the resume I think we need to attend to a little bit more, instead of this piece of paper, which, tends to sort of, I don't know, encapsulate us in some way that I think is really constricting, and in my case, really, really false. It was like the students were so excited about that, and I was like, wait a second, a lot of failure there that I didn't write about. There was a lot of rejection. There's a lot of racial trauma that I don't even discuss in that. So, I think that's.
Yeah, but I think that's so valid. And like, as you were talking, I'm kind of thinking about the topic of this conversation, right? The pandemic, and how this is a moment that when I write my memoir, like, is going to be so essential, because I was not anywhere near the paper version of me in the beginning of this pandemic, nor was so many other people. I wasn't going to class. I wasn't answering questions. I was just camera off, like, I'm over it. Right. And so anyone who knows me is like, what? Eva wasn't raising her hand? Like, excuse me? But that is where I had the opportunity to talk to people who I hadn't talked to in a long time, and think about the things that I didn't have time to do before, and really just start to grow, like, all of those personal triumphs, because they were very personal. I was supposed to have my McNear graduation, my honors program graduation, my regular graduation, all of these things that were like accolades that were going to show me how great I was. And all of that stuff was like, the pandemic said, no, ma'am. Yeah. And I had to realize, like, but those things weren't necessarily, I mean, granted, I still wanted my graduation, but
and you deserve it.
But I also realized that I'm more than having people clap for me, and that, like, the work that I'm doing is important. And so that's why, in the matter of a couple of months, Black on Black education blew up in a way that I was not expecting. And we still have tons of way to go, but everything that you said is so, like, on key with, I had a professor tell me, like, listen, I know things are rough right now. What's going on? But what is it that you want to feel? What do you want to create? Who do you want to serve? And those questions really oriented me to, like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, even though this is what I wanted to be doing, or I thought I should be doing right now. Okay. And so I just want to kind of get into this conversation around the pandemic, around recreating the world, as we move through this just, like, global pause button.
Excuse me.
How has your life and your work changed since the onset of the pandemic?
Oh, wow. Eva, so I guess, like everybody else, it's changed hugely, right? It's changed in huge ways. I think, your point is super well stated, right? That this shift that none of us ever anticipated, right? I mean, I was thinking the other day, who could have ever thought, right, a year ago that we'd be wearing masks everywhere, or that there'd be more than a quarter of a million people, or approaching a quarter of a million people dead, right? Who were here with us last year, right? It's shocking how life has changed, right? My life, of course, has changed in the ways that everybody's has. I'm home all the time. I am, I see very few people. It is, I have the same feelings of sort of isolation and sort of disconnect that many people do. I am, of course, though, and I think your point alludes to this. I'm super grateful, and I'm super privileged to be able to even, talk about this. I mean, to even be here with you today. It has been a reset for all of us, right? I mean, in some ways, I think it's reset me in the idea that I am much less less apt to take things for granted, that we're just so normal. Right now, it just seems like the most amazing thing to just see a group of people, right? To see my friends, it seems beyond all imagining to like, just, I don't know, go to the movies, right? These things that we did just as a commonplace practice just seem really far-fetched now, right? They seem really, really out of from a different world. But I think, you know, it has been an opportunity for all of us to sort of rethink the way we're doing things. I realize now, like so many people did, I realized I was exhausted. I realized I was carrying way too much. You know, busy had become so normal, right? And almost like it had become a marker of achievement in some ways. When there was nothing for me to do, I had to learn to do nothing. Right. And to be okay with that. Right. I learned in this period, it sort of showed me that, you know, it reinforced this idea, I think that you alluded to that, oh, right. And I always knew this, but sometimes it takes this big sort of, you know, major event to sort of just bring it home. But I realized how much of the world and how much I was just so externally focused. I was just focused on everything happening out there, right? It was just all out there. The action was out there. The action was out there. And I think this has just been a period where I think many of us, or many people, if you have these sort of the luxury to do so, and I think it is something of a luxury, I was able to sort of really use this time to sort of go inward on things, right? And to sort of get some clarity about what I'm doing, about what I'm not doing, about what I should be doing. And I'm really leery about that because, you know, one of the should be doing part, anyway, I'm a little bit leery about that just because one of the challenges that I had, and I think many people had, is that during this period, I really felt like I wasn't doing enough. I really felt I had this sense of like inadequacy, right? I felt really that I had come up short every day. I'm like, oh, well, I only did 3 emails today. I only read 50 pages today. You know, and it was this whole notion of like, I should have been doing something. You know, I started like 4 different foreign languages during this period. I mean, it was just I've read so many books, but part of that is because that's what I want to do. But part of it was because there is this notion of like, who am I if I'm not productive me, right? If I'm not productive in the traditional sense, who am I? And I think it really has, for me at least, but I think for many people that I know, this has really changed in the way that I think about how we've internalized some of the harshest message of capitalism. And we embody this idea that if we aren't productive, we aren't valuable, right? And then to really think about how we think about ourselves as people, as human beings, not human doings, right? And just to really get comfortable with the fact that it's okay if a day goes by and you actually just watch Netflix. That's not a bad day in a global pandemic, right? That's not a bad day. So that's one of the big things. And then just quickly about my work, since I'm not teaching this semester, it hasn't been such a huge shift for me. Obviously, doing everything online is a bit odd for me. I am a very much in person. I mean, when I'm teaching, I'm very, very engaged, very active, very sort of interactive with students. So, you know, it's been interesting, but I will say this, it has offered us possibilities and opportunities that I think we did not have, right? We do have this moment to rethink stuff. So, you know, it's been obviously a mixed bag. When I look at what's happening in the world, it's not good. But at the same time, I do understand in these moments of huge shifts that we always have to keep our eyes open for the possibilities and for the opportunities, right? In our lives and the lives of others.
Yeah, what you know, one of the things that came up for me when you just was talking, or just question more or less, is when you do teach it in the next semester, you know, how has this period of time changed what you are going to, you know, deliver to students, how you're going to deliver it to students?
Right. I think that's the thing. So, you know, I actually misstated because, you know, when the pandemic started, I was actually teaching. So okay. I was teaching last spring, and so I had the students in person from, I guess even we were February and March. We had basically February and
then halfway through March, yeah.
And then halfway through March we stopped. So I had them in class. We were on this really interesting intellectual journey. I teach on international criminal law. So I was teaching a class about genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, right? So these enormous international crimes that are really obviously some of the most egregious things that ever happened. So, you know, we were on this intellectual journey with the students, and then halfway through, they're like, well, this is, you know, stay home, everybody. So we switched to this digital platform. And for me, it was interesting because I was really nervous at first, right? But you know, what I realized when I started seeing the students on Zoom, I'm like, well, they're nervous too. We're all nervous, right? It's not my nervousness or your nerve. It's our collective nervousness, right? It's our collective anxiety, which was really a liberating thing for me because, you know, one thing this did is that, you know, I had this whole syllabus and this whole plan of this is the journey I want to go on. I mean, I threw that thing out. I'm like, forget it. I mean, I threw it out. I'm like, it doesn't mean anything anymore, right? And it didn't mean anything really then. I realized, right? What I do think it's done for me is to think about how do I deliver, or how do I offer information that is what the students want to learn. So one of the things I did when this happened, I said, well, you know, since we don't have to follow anything anymore, we don't even have to do this class, to be honest with you. I can just make videos, right? You don't even have to see me again. We have the opportunity to think about what we want to do now. Right. So I said, one of the things I like to do is I like to scrap a bunch of these topics and go in deep on a few other ones. Right. And I sort of took a vote and got some consensus, and we sort of changed our approach. We got rid of a lot of topics, and we really dove into some of the big ones. So in lots of ways, this shift has been freeing. I think if you aren't caught up in sort of having to make things look like they used to look, because they don't, and it's kind of a fool's errand to try to do that. But if you aren't committed to sort of making things look like they did before, I think you have this real interesting opportunity to, I honestly felt like the class I had last semester was one of the best classes I've ever taught. I actually think my Zoom class was, because, you know, it's one thing when I'm teaching from the kitchen and they're in the bedroom, right? Something changes, right? The hierarchies are gone, right? That's one thing that I think that this thing did. It got rid of a lot of the hierarchies. It was like I'm a dude in the kitchen teaching, and they're like in the bed, and the dog is on top of them in the bed, and you know, so I mean, like, who cares, right? I mean, it was just like people in their houses, and we're just talking about things, and I think, you know, that was one thing that shifted with me. So I sort of moved away from sort of the structure that was so important, I think, before, and to sort of say, like, what do you want to learn? What do you want to learn? Like, what in this moment do you want to learn about? And so and fascinating things came out from that I might not have known. So for instance, I'm teaching this class on genocide, and I realized at some point, I'm talking about the histories of genocide, and I'm talking about these things. And then this class is, you know, full of students who are Latinx, and there's some Black students as well, but predominantly a Latinx class, many of whom are majoring in Latin American studies, right? So Latino and Latin American studies. And so, you know, it was interesting because I was talking about genocide, and I realized there had been no input about the genocide that occurred on the land that we're talking about, right? It's like really wonderful to talk about Rwanda, right, in Cambodia, and right in Bosnia, but what about here, right? What about the fact that this is the site of an enormous genocide? And, you know, the fact of the matter was the students just had never been taught that before. And so it's interesting. I'm like, so I said, you know, it makes me wonder about what I've been teaching you, and about how I've been teaching, and about what anybody's been teaching you, because how do you get to be a junior in the honors class, and you've never no one's ever challenged you to think about the fact that we live on the site of an enormous genocide, right? So I say that to say that, you know, in this moment, we can think about teaching in lots of different ways. I think it's really important for me to sort of remember that you can throw things out now. I mean, you could throw them out before, but now you can really throw them out. I mean, you don't. The hierarchies are blurred if they're existent at all. And I think it's just a reminder what we should be doing all the time, and we should have always been doing, and I hope we'll be doing going forward, is to really attend to the learning and the knowledge that is important to the people who are in front of us, right? I find it fascinating that a bunch of students who are studying Latinx studies had never talked about the genocide either in North America or South America, right? And so, you know, I think we can use this opportunity just to sort of shed what we think we need to do, and do what the needful thing is, go right to where the students are.
Definitely really hope that, you know, people like listened intently there, and that is the way that people are approaching things. I remember when everything kicked off, one of the first things that and I'm not a traditional educator, like, you know, I mean, I've never been in the classroom, and so, you know, some people may be like, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about, but you know, some stuff that seems really self-evident. And so the idea of from all levels of sitting down and understanding what a child actually wants to learn, or what a young adult actually wants to learn, it only makes sense that those are going to be the things that are going to help them to better understand the learning process, because the things that they're interested in. And so if nothing else, good comes out of the death and economic destruction, that the pandemic has caused, if it allows us to create environments where the act of unlearning becomes just as important as the act of learning, and the act of putting things aside that we no longer need, to replace them with things that are going to move us towards a brighter future in education, then these are trade-offs that just happen all the time. But hopefully people are looking at that trade-off and trying to support it. Like, if we have to go through this crap, let's make sure on the other side of it, something good comes out of it. So I definitely hope that people are able to look at things that way.
I hope so too. I do think that one of the sort of the downsides in this that I've seen on this has been, though, is that, again, there's that notion of we've got to do this in a different format, or we're going to do it exactly like we did it before.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to tell you what is important to you. Right. I'm going to tell you what you need to know. And I think, it's a squandered moment. And I think it also, to me, one of the things that and your point is so important, because I do think, one of the things I've always done in the classroom has been on the first day to ask the students, what do you want to do? I come with a syllabus, but I say I can throw it away and I can do a new one. Right. I mean, but to your point, I also think it requires something that educators sometimes don't have, and particularly younger educators, is that it takes a lot of confidence to come into a room and say, I can teach whatever you want me to teach you. Right. I can do whatever you want to do. Right. You have to shed your ego. Right. You have to shed your positionality in the room. Right. You have to shed a lot of things and sort of put somebody else in the driver's seat, which, of course, we should have always been doing. But I think this where we're now gives us a really extraordinary moment to rethink hierarchies, to rethink about about how we attend to what students want and need to know. Right. So yeah, that's been a real. It was a big shift for me. I thought the class was going to be really very difficult. It was the most vibrant discussion I've ever had. Right. I mean, some of the best discussions we've ever had.
Absolutely. And I agree. And I had very similar experiences with some of my classes as it came to the end of my time in college. And I think it was because, one, people were craving interaction, right? And so that want to come to school, at least for me and for people who are in some of my classes, it was even more than before, because there was this just serious push to like interact and be intellectually stimulated, because there's only so much Netflix that you can watch before you start going crazy. And so I agree that I've had some of the most intellectually stimulating conversations that I've had during the pandemic, particularly the podcast, the conversations that we're having in those times. Like, people were just really thinking about how we come out on the other side of this, changing.
Yes.
Just changing everything. People have always said, those of us who consider ourselves abolitionists, like, we're never going to be able to just stop what we did. The regents just said we're not going to do it. Like, that's simple. We're like, nope, they're not taking the exam. So if it was that easy to say we're not taking the exam, then clearly the exam is not something that is just so necessary to children learning that it needed to exist.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, it's fascinating, the stuff that we thought we could never do without.
Never.
In weeks was gone, right? Things that were articles of faith that could never be challenged were gone, right? So, and in your point, I said this so much, and I agree with you 100%. It means they weren't important in the first place. It means that they weren't in the first place, right? And I think the thing, to your point about that, is it does make me think about, yes, this situation gave us this opportunity to look at things differently. But I also think that, I mean, this is a very sort of dark benefit, right, of this. But it brought forth things like this, things that were just simply habit, wrote routine things that we called rules because we called them rules, not because they had any intrinsic value in their own right, which I think is super important. I mean, especially with things like testing, right? I mean, which we know is a barrier, right, that has been thrown up artificially to keep some people in a certain place in society, a lot of times Black people. I talk a lot about this with law school admissions, right? The law school admissions test, which has changed now itself, right? Now it's shorter. They got rid of a section, you know, you do it at home. We could have been doing that forever, right? We could have been doing that forever. But, you know, I think the sort of the dark side of this, though, of course, has been, just like it's shown us what has been, you know, been done and replicated over and over just because we continue to do it. It also, I think, because it underscored so much of the inequity that we live with, that we thought was just normal, right? I mean, maybe we didn't think it was normal. We knew it wasn't okay, but as a society, we had chosen collectively to say, well, this is just the way things go, right? But the pandemic, of course, you know, a virus being a virus does not respect those distinctions, right? And the virus, of course, and we see this particularly now cutting across huge swaths of the nation, right? But I think, you know, it really did underscore all of the things that we had made uncomfortable, but we had made a peace with, right? We had made a peace with the vast inequities that were plaguing Black students and poor students, and English as a second language, non-English speaking students, and that had sort of plagued LGBTQs. I mean, we saw all of these things come to the fore, right? It was easy to mask that in the time when everybody just went home. You did your class, you went home, everybody was done. Now these issues of inequity really just came right to the fore, and you know, in some ways, I think we've looked at them, and I think in some small cases we've grappled with them. I'm happy to see the regents canceling the exam. I'm happy to see these things going by the wayside. At the same time, we have to, as an educational community, as a society, we have to think about how we are going to attend to the inequities that this thing has brought up right to our face. We can't deny it anymore, right?
Yeah.
I walked by the college, you know, during the middle of the pandemic. I just happened to go down there, and there were students sitting out on the steps. The college was closed, but they're sitting on the steps because nobody cut the Wi-Fi off, right? Heartbreaking, disgusting, and really just so deeply problematic, right? And I thought, wow, this is the country we live in, right? This is where we live.
Yep. And there was just so many moments. Like, I had a professor for a final. He was like, yeah, you have to have it. It needs to be done by Tuesday at 11:59. And one of my friends, listen, John Jay, I met no hustlers like John Jay students,
right?
And
right.
Professors, like hustlers. And so she was like, I have a daughter. I'm preparing to go to a PhD program. Like, I don't have the capacity to do that. And he's like, well, if we were in person, then you would have to well, if we weren't in a global pandemic, she would have childcare.
Right.
Like, what are we doing? And so it really.
Go ahead, please. No, please, go ahead, please.
No, it really is just thinking about how indoctrinated we've all been to this is how things have to work in order for it to happen. Like, in order for the end goal to happen, these are the steps that we must take in order to get there, which just is inaccurate.
It's inaccurate, and it's also insane, right? Because the way we were doing things, look at the outcomes. They weren't great for a lot of people. I mean, right? Yes, we could have continued to do it, and we could say, "Oh yeah, but look what we were doing." Yeah, look what we were doing. Look what we weren't doing. Look who was getting left behind with what we were doing. Look at what I mean. As someone who spent, now the bulk of my career in the educational realm, and it's been such a funny space for me. I think we don't talk enough about with students because it's a very self-congratulatory field, right? We were like, oh look, she learned this, she got an A, she went to Harvard. I mean, we have these weird metrics that we look at, but the fact of the matter is, we know, and I think everybody here knows, that these institutions in so many ways are just producing and replicating the inequality that exists in the world, right? This whole notion that we're making all of this change in schools, it's a great idea. I don't know that it's happening for a lot of students. I just don't know that it's happening. I just think in lots of ways, we just keep churning people out to sort of occupy places where, in the sort of the societal hierarchy that we expect them to fit in, right? And so I'm always leery of the underlying notion that, we were doing things right, and we were, and the pandemic came and messed everything up, and when we can reset and go back to normal, I'm like, normal was terrible.
Right.
Let's just, because normal was terrible. So you can go back to terrible.
Absolutely. Yeah,
right?
No, I mean, even in the K through 12 system, we said that it was okay for certain students because of their socioeconomic status, because of the property taxes in their community, that they didn't deserve to have computers. They didn't deserve to know how to use the thing that will make them successful in the future. Like, end of sentence. We said that was okay. And then when there was a global pandemic, all of a sudden now we can get computers and hotspots for every child. Right. And just to say, we're still not doing that. Shout out to New York State, where you sit on the phone for an hour to help your student out and nobody helps you. Yeah. Right. It's crazy.
It's fascinating I always, I was asking the students in the class last semester, I was saying, isn't it fascinating that this thing happened and all of a sudden the government was able to disperse money and give people money, right? Because you didn't have the money. I mean, people needed the money a year ago, right? People have always, it's fascinating what people, when they think a situation is extraordinary, it's fascinating what they'll do when in fact the situation, yes, on some very superficial level, yes, this is a novel situation. The problems that it's underscored are not at all new, right?
Absolutely.
Right? Anybody who understood anything about sort of the nature of Black life in America would have not been surprised a year ago if you said to them, well, if a virus came to this country, who would be hardest hit? Who would be the people who would suffer the most? Who would be the people who were locked out of, right? I mean, these aren't new problems, right? But we were so steeped in our idea of this is normal. This is normal. And I think, you made a point about this that I think is so important that I see in my work is that, we live in a place where the decision was made to fund education on property taxes with the obvious consequences that's going to have for certain students. It doesn't escape anybody's attention that that's obviously going to create a bifurcated system where the people who have will have, and right, then the Scott will get, and then the not shall lose, right? I mean, Billie Holiday and the Bible say it, right? So it's clear that we do that. But it's interesting to me because by the time I meet students in my office, where you've been, Eva, students come and say, Dr. Davidson, I'm not cut out for college, or my reading isn't good, or I didn't learn this, right? And it's a personal thing, right? They believe it's them. Right? They believe the failure is them, that they are the failure, right? And and I always ask them, I say, well, let's go back a bit and tell me where you went to elementary school. Oh, it was terrible. I said, well, where'd you go to high school? Oh, Dr. Davidson, that was horrible. I said, what about high school? Well, we had one good teacher there, and there was this, that, and there was, but really it was a terrible place. It was like a warehouse. And I said, so tell me where you thought you were going to get the skills that you're talking about you don't have now, and why you think it's a failing on you. And you better be clear that this is a policy decision that somebody made, lots of somebody's made, about a person that looks like you, right?
Absolutely.
And that while you have an obligation to sort of do your best to correct those things, understand that it isn't of your doing, right? This is not your doing, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
No, yeah, and that just was like a perfect segue into the next question that I wanted to ask you about. Like, I consider you one of my mentors at John Jay, one of the people who I could go to and help kind of guide me in a where do I go next? I'm confused. I think it's me. I'm the problem. What am I not doing right? So just talk a little bit about mentorship and like what that looks like now, because we're living in a pandemic, and what it needs to look like moving into the future. Because I think that is one of the key pieces that's helped me receive the education that I have. It's not that I was like just and just extremely smart, and like that's just, my brain is incredible, and I just had really great people who were like, read this book or watch this thing or do these things.
You got good genes. You got good genes.
I think you're exactly. I think you're being a bit modest now. I think you downplaying that a little bit. But the point is well taken. I think it's super important to have some people whom, and I think this is why I take the work so seriously, just because I realize how many people don't have anybody to sort of help them. I mean, your point was really, I think, interesting to me, that someone like you, I perceive you in a certain light, in sort of a certain academic and intellectual light, obviously, and it really resonated that that even you, all of us, really to some degree, though, we walk away with the idea that our failings are just us, right? It's my shortcoming. It's me. It's me. And I think if you don't talk to anybody else, and this is why mentorship is important, if you don't talk to anybody else to break that loop, when does the loop get broken, right? And I think that explains so much of the world. We all are walking around feeling like, oh no, this is my failure. This is my, I'm the one who doesn't know. I failed in this way. Well, yeah, maybe we didn't. None of us have ever made the best decision in every circumstances. But what we tend to do is we tend to indict ourselves and exonerate the systems. We indict ourselves and we let the systems off the hook. Right? We indict our community, we indict our families, but we let the systems that created the circumstances off the hook, right? We never bring them, to book for having created circumstances in which we feel this way. So I really feel like now more than ever, partly because of something you said earlier, this is an isolating period. People don't really have you can't make the connections in the way you could, right? It's harder to sort of to really connect and really. I used to see like 10 to 12 people a day. Now maybe I see 4. And that reflects the complicated nature of people's lives. It reflects a lot of things, but we really need in this moment, and I think students particularly really need in this moment, the support of mentors, right? People who will help them. I mean, one of the things that I have done is that I've just reached out on my own to groups of students, right? To groups of Black students, actually, and reached out and said, listen, let's just get together, just us, our conversation, my private Zoom, we talk freely. And, everybody jumps on the idea, right? And you realize people are really thirsty in this moment for someone to say, listen, not you, not me, it's this, right? It's this. And I think sometimes, one of the things that we said about the classes, I mean, you said your classes were really exciting in 2020, but I think one of the things that was really most important to me was that, one of the evaluations I got from 2020 was that the person wrote that, we learned a lot, but Dr. Davidson brought compassion and understanding for us to the classroom. And like, who cares about learning? I mean, I care about learning, but I mean, I really do feel like people right now, like the thing we can do is to share, our own anxieties, really to bring compassion to this, and then to really help do what we always should be doing, is really elevating people in the ways that they need, in the ways that they need, to help people and support them and remind them. Because I think one of the things that we are grappling with more than ever is that it's terribly lonely like this. And it's so in that unbroken loop, it's so easy to think of everything that you've done wrong and all of these things as your failure. So I think we absolutely need to really revitalize. We people, those of us who serve as mentors, have to really do much more in terms of outreach. We have to be supporting people in lots of different ways. I mean, I think a lot of my calls now they're not at all about the content, right? I mean, it's about that somebody just wants to sit and say, oh, I haven't told anybody, but my mother died last month, right? Or this is what's happening in my household. So I think the need for mentorship, guidance, right, support is as acute as it ever was, and probably more acute. Yeah. I think this moment calls from all of us to really to have a lot of compassion for each other, for students, and particularly for those people who are most acutely affected, right? Yeah. It's interesting because one of the challenges that we've had, and I don't know if you were around for this, but one of the challenges we've had and it's not just us, it's everywhere, that there have been these discussions about students coming to the class with the cameras off. And is that okay? And can students have cameras off? And can they not show their screens? And, you know, there were all these professors saying, well, of course they need their cameras on. How will we know? And how can we, you know, you can't have a vibrant community without people participating. And you can't, if you can't see them, you don't know what they're doing. And it just, I mean, it felt sort of racialized. It felt classist. It felt, you know, it just rubbed me the wrong way in so many ways. And, you know, my argument was, I was like, well, here's the thing. You didn't know what they were doing when they were sitting in front of you, right? You didn't know what was happening on the laptop when they were in front of you. So the notion that you think, right, the camera is telling them telling you how engaged they are is ridiculous. But it's also an interesting moment for you to check your desire to control people, right? I mean, it's a really interesting moment to think about your need for control. But you know, the other piece of it is that I also said, you know, you can't ask a student to show you their home. That's not something I haven't historically wanted to show you my home. I don't think we can ask students to do that. And I said, that actually undermines the learning process of the student. And they're like, well, there are virtual backgrounds. I'm like, yeah, and that's a bandwidth suck that some people don't have. Imagine if you're in a house with 5 other kids all needing to use the internet. I was like, it's ridiculous. And so, you know, there are lots of ways in which, again, we've tried to impose these hierarchies, but we've done it without compassion, right? And we're doing this without compassion. So I do think it's really important to, for all of us, right? For mentors and mentees, right? I mean, it's just really important for us to bring a lot of heart and compassion to this moment, because I think people are really struggling. We've normalized something that's abnormal right now. I mean, we've gotten sort of used to it. We throw our masks on. We're somewhat used to it. It's super abnormal. You know, you human beings are remarkably resilient, right? We quickly become accustomed to things, right? And we normalize what shouldn't be normal, right? And so I think one of the things we have to do is to break that chain, is to sort of break the sort of idea that we can just sort of see people face to face and like, how are you? I hope you're well, and keep it moving. That's not what the moment calls for. The moment calls for us to really attend to people, to our students, to really ensure that they're doing well, even if that means you don't get to cover what was on the syllabus for that day.
Right. And I would add just one other thing to what you just mentioned around kind of the policing, the camera on, camera off. It's also an invitation for a teacher to, you know, look inward to themselves and, you know, obviously take away the idea of trying to control a student while, you know, thinking about how to influence them. And perhaps, you know, there's something about you making the conversation that much more interesting, you making the conversation that much more engaging for you, like you doing the engaging part, that makes a student say, you know what, I got to get in on this. And, you know, I'll go over to this little corner if my, you know, house is not, you know, in what I want people to see, but I need to get in on this conversation. Right. So, you know, it allows each of us to think about what the best version of ourselves is exactly right, in order to help students bring out the best version of themselves.
I think that's so well put, and I think that's beautifully stated. I think that all the time we tend to shift the burden, right? I mean, when we're not comfortable, we tend to shift the burden. We say, oh no, it's your failure, it's your failing, it's something you aren't doing. When in truth, if the conversation were engaging enough, the student could participate or would participate. Or even if you can't tell the students participating, they are, right? I mean, you don't have to have a quantifiable metric of student engagement. You don't know. Some of the students who are looking at you most intently are completely asleep, or, you know, in another world, or on a beach somewhere, right? It's absolutely right. And I think it is a moment for us all to step up our game in that regard, and to really find ways to make this situation one in which people feel supported, people feel engaged. I think, you know, in lots of ways, I think that the danger of this has been, for some people, it's often opened up this laboratory to do new things. And some people, it's opened this way of like, well, I can just make some videos and you watch the videos and then write a paper, right? I mean, it's been a mixed bag, but I do think the best work that's coming out of this are people who are really still trying to engage students who still are putting the students' holistic well-being first, right? I think we're seeing some really positive things. We're seeing some really really good stuff coming from that, I think.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, so I mean, the one thing we want to know, because we're coming up towards towards our time. If you can speak specific to the students, high school and higher ed, and just a couple of their biggest takeaways, from this moment, or the suggestions that you as a mentor will have for how they approach things, particularly when we get back to quote unquote more more normal. What are some of the things that they can do to better influence their own, education? I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think, one of the things that always matters is, whether you're a high school student, whether you're a college student, wherever you are on the trajectory, right? I think it's super important that students recognize that, I did it as a student. We tend to do it. I want students, and I think they do this a lot, and I say this in no scolding way, but I want students to really very early on as they can, particularly if you're in places that aren't so wonderfully resourced, or there are other situations. I think it's really important for us. I wish that I had been much more self-directed in my own learning, right? Instead of relying on people to tell me this is what you should know. I really think that every student knows that there's something that she wants to know that really just turns her on intellectually, that really makes her think, oh wow, this is, whether it's something that seems I don't know, not traditional, or something quite traditional. It doesn't matter. I think the important thing for a student to always do is to find the thing, whatever that thing is. Find whatever it is that just makes you. It can be basketball, it can be video games. I don't care what it is, right? We have this very narrow hierarchy of the things that are acceptable motivations. Who cares what your motivation is? Who cares get motivated by something, right? Let something inspire you, right? Whatever that is. I don't care if you say it's, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Let that motivation really, really inspire you. Let that thing inspire you, because the thing is that, one of the dangers is that we've made students believe that really the only ways that they can accomplish or they can be successful is to follow these narrow pathways and these narrow sort of interests. And in fact, the reality of it is the people who really are switched on, the people who really succeed, it's because, and I'm thinking of you even to some degree, it's people who really find the thing that they love, right? And that motivates them. And one of the things we don't tell students to do is, I'm like, look around your home, look around your community, look on your block, look somewhere close by. And we always think it's out there. No, it might be in your house.
Yeah.
It might be something that you see your mother doing. It might be these things. And I think for so long, students of color, particularly Black students, the things that we've thought are interesting have not been appropriate sources of scholarship or appropriate sources of inquiry, right? We think, oh no, those aren't, nobody, ridiculous. I tell the students all the time, your experience is your expertise, right? Whatever you've experienced, you're an expert in, and you can treat it as such, right? And so I would invite students to really think about what are the things that they are loving, the things that are inspiring to them, the things that are motivating to them. Think about those things. And while we're in this moment of sort of, this still in something of a pause, and I think we're going to go back into another one in a few weeks. I think that's coming. Use the time, right? Use the time. And not in some way that you feel like you have to sort of produce or be productive, but use the time to really think about where you want to go with this, because this is going to end, right? And this is going to end, and opportunities are going to materialize again. And I'm talking again to Black students about this, but I really do, but it's true for everybody, but I really do want us to come out of this in a way that we never look back and say, I had this strange moment and I could have, right? I could have thought about these things, right? It's not to put pressure on people. You don't have to do anything in this period. I'm really resistant of these things of like, if you come out of this without speaking another language or having a career plan, you fit ridiculous. I mean, do your best in this situation. But I think the last thing I would say is, like, use this period to learn to do the thing. And this is the unlearning, Mr. Thomas, that you spoke about. I think is like, do the thinking that's going to help you unlearn some of the things that we might have believed before. Because I think what the world is going to look like a very different place when we go back. It's not going to look like what we thought it was before. Really figure out, or start thinking about the things that, you can do in this new world, right? Because there are tons of things that actually have been really good for lots of people who weren't thriving in the old system, right? That a lot of people weren't. I mean, even the podcast. I mean, you as you say, this took off during these periods, right? I mean, it was something, an idea you had, but it's these things can thrive in this period. And I would only, and then my last thing, and I say this to students all the time, is like, really don't worry about getting where you want to go, right? Figure out where you want to go. But I would invite you to worry less about whether you're going to get there, because I know that you will, right? That's the thing. I really don't worry about whether people who really are committed to achieving something will achieve it. I feel very confident that in some way, shape, or form they will. The work, I think, for us is to figure out who you're going to be when you get it, right? Spend some time thinking about who you're going to be when you get the things. We're all worried about, am I going to get it? Is it going to show up? Is it going to show up? Is it going to show up? Do I deserve it? Am I smart enough? What are my grades? Forget all that. Focus on who you're going to be, right? So start developing the qualities of intellect and character and heart and spirit and discipline that are going to help you when you get there. Because the key thing is, you are going to get there. And so, I don't want another group of people to be the people who get things and then don't know how to hold them when they arrive, because that's what happens to so many of us, because our minds are on the treadmill of, am I going to make it? Can I get there? Can I get there? Can I get there? Yes, you can get there. Just know who you're going to be when you get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, crazy. I'm looking at the clock and it's been 56 minutes of just like,
I don't feel
now y'all got to just look in on what it was like to sit in Dr. Davidson's office and just listen to him talk, the soothing voice, like all of it. I love it. And so I want to end the way we end all podcasts, with giving you the opportunity to ask us a question about the topic at hand. But yeah, so you're the interviewer.
So, I have to say this is so kind of unique, because I mean, I knew you as a student. And so I just kind of want to ask you, like, what factors do you attribute? I mean, were there any things that happened in your education that actually made this possible for you? Like, we always congratulate ourselves on what students do, but we actually don't know what the formula is. We don't know what happened. What was the mix, right, of the things that were positive and negative, I guess, that made it possible for you to do something like this?
Wow, that's a great question. My freshman year of college, I did not go to the McDonald's over on 59th Street. Like, never went, never. I came to school, I went to my 2 classes, I went home every day. And part of it's because John Jay wasn't my first pick school. Part of it was because I only had 2 friends. And so going to a commuter school was different for me, because I came from a very small high school in the suburbs. And so I would go home every day and hang out with my high school friends, because that was like what I did. And my second semester, I had a professor in psych. And I just I loved the class. I just loved the class. It's and it was a lecture style class. So it was just interesting that I enjoyed less discussion, but I just loved all the content, all the information I was learning. And she came up to me and was like, "Hey, are you in the honors program?" And I was like, "No." And she was like, "I'm going to write your recommendation letter, get your application together and apply." And so I did. And so it was like a mixture of the honors program and all of the resources that are available to students who are in a program like honors. And then I got into McNear and I found my people, right? Like, those are my humans. Every single day in the McNear, in our tiny little McNear lounge, that wasn't as beautiful and gorgeous as the honors lounge, but we had a great time in there every single day. And we would just talk for hours. I could be home right now, but I would just stay and we would just talk. And it came to the point where I got an internship through the Vera fellowship. And 2 weeks in, I knew that I was supposed to teach. I knew that education was what I was supposed to do. And I changed everything. I changed my major. I went to your office. I changed my research idea, like changed everything. And I just went for it. And I had people backing me saying, like, you're in college and you're supposed to change. Like, you don't have to get a PhD in psychology because that's what you told yourself in 8th grade. Like, you don't have to do that. And so I had a bunch of people who supported me through the idea that, like, this is the person who you want to be. This is the passion. This is your calling. Don't try to fit into a job or an idea that you had for yourself when you came here, because that changes. That's what college is for. And so that really was the formula, having incredible people, incredible mentors. Shout out to Jama, shout out to Dr. Patton, Dr. Lentz, Dr. Lee, are we kidding? Like Dr. Gordon Nemhart, Dr. Nina Rose Fisher, like all of them are just...
All of them, everybody's a doctor?
They're professors at college.
That is not working.
They get PhDs. But they're all just like incredible people. And obviously you, that just really just walked me through, like, you can do these things. Imposter syndrome is fake. Like, stop listening to that thing in the back of your head that's telling you can't do it, and like keep pushing forward. So yeah, that was the formula. John Jay definitely is. It will get a footnote in the memoir for sure.
I love it. I love it. I really do. I love that. It's always helpful to know, like, what did the student perceive made this possible. So I think thank you for saying that. And I really do. I do appreciate that. And I appreciate you all talking to you all. That was really fun. Obviously, I can talk forever. So it was really lovely talking to you all. And thank you for that.
Absolutely. Is there anything you want to leave people with? Is there anything, your last statement that you want to leave listeners with of, like, this is kind of my gift to you before we head out?
It's not a gift from me to anybody, but it's something that you just said about this notion. And we had this conversation about imposter syndrome, it being fake, and these ideas. I mean, I always think it's interesting because when you said that, it dawned on me that, and I say this to students a lot. I mean, it's really important for us to recognize, and it sort of circles back to how we began this conversation, because I thought about this when the person read my bio the other day. Those feelings that we have that we're not good enough, we haven't done enough, there's something inadequate about us, we don't belong. I mean, those feelings are very real. I mean, and I think it's important to be psychologically and spiritually unsound to say that those feelings weren't real. The thing about it is, a feeling can be real and at the same time not be true. Right? And I think it's just important to subject our own feelings to some inquiry, right? And to say, yeah, like, I am feeling that. Don't deny that. But understand that a lot of those feelings you have, they feel very real. They just aren't true, right? A thing can feel real and not be true. And we believe our own thoughts way too much. So I guess the only thing I'd say to people is stop believing your thoughts, right? We believe our thoughts. If we stop believing your thoughts, right, we can do something really different. And that goes for this whole conversation. If we stop believing our thinking about what education looked like, if we stop believing about how things had to be done, we could find that those feelings feel real. They just aren't true, right? It just isn't true. So that's what I would think. That's what you made me think of it as a closing word.
Absolutely. I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening. He dropped the gems, so all we have to do is listen to them.
It's always a pleasure. It was lovely to meet you. Lovely to meet you, Mr. Thomas. Lovely to meet you. It's a real pleasure. So be in touch, Ava. Let me know what's coming next. But I want to say thanks again, and really just once again, like, I'm super proud of you. You're really making it happen, and nothing could be better to an educator than seeing it actually happen in real life.
Thank you so much.
Have a lovely day. Thank you so much.
You too.
Bye bye. Bye guys.